So good day to everyone, and welcome to this special edition with a special guest. We have the honor to have today with us Mr. Ali Aslan, a renowned Turkish-German journalist who will be joining us in the next hour in this conversation about the German politics after the departure of Chancellor Merkel. Welcome to Kosovo, Mr. Aslan.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We have some journalists and some of our friends. This is something which is organized by Friedrich Ebert Stiftung office in Kosovo. We thank Ms. Bes Luja for organizing this, and this is a joint project with the Association of Journalists of Kosovo. This is going to be an open discussion. I'm going to be interviewing you for my show, obviously, but it's going to be an open discussion, and people can ask questions, and I'm sure it will be an interesting discussion. Mr. Aslan, first of all, is Germany going to survive without Merkel?
Well, I have a pretty good feeling that we will, yes. Look, we've survived the departure of other iconic figures such as Willy Brandt, Helmut Kohl, Konrad Adenauer. No, look, make no mistake about it. Of course, Chancellor Merkel has left her mark. 16 years is remarkable for any politician in any country, let alone a country like Germany, the most populous, the most affluent, the most powerful nation in Europe. She wasn't dubbed the most international and the most powerful woman in the world for nothing. So she certainly has left her mark. But yes, no, I mean, look, we will survive, of course, because first and foremost, the person who's coming in, Olaf Scholz, he's a very known quantity. He's a proven force in German politics. He's been a constant presence throughout the years. We've seen him in numerous positions. He's held ministerial positions. He was Minister of Labor. Obviously, he was just the most recent Minister of Finance. He was the mayor of my hometown, Hamburg. He was the Secretary General of his own party. So we're not dealing with a rookie here. But even if, think about Angela Merkel when she started, right? I mean, many people look towards her as a fluke, an accident, even a temporary chancellor who's just holding place until somebody really mature and more experienced comes along. And now 16 years later, we're talking about a bona fide international stateswoman who's internationally known, regarded, and respected. So, you know, politicians grow in this role. They have to grow in this role.
And she has overseen some 4 US presidents, some 5 or 6 UK prime ministers, some maybe 6 to 7 Kosovo prime ministers by the time she was elected. What's her legacy going to be? How will she be remembered, not just in Germany, but around the world?
My feeling is, and to talk about Angela Merkel's legacy would take up most of the time of your show, so let me be brief. I think, first and foremost, I think she will be remembered positively. I think, and you can see and you can tell by the reception and the reaction we're getting worldwide regarding her departure. I mean, she's being lauded as a very steady force, a positive force in international politics, in European politics. I think the one remarkable thing, first and foremost for myself and many Germans, is her humility, her humbleness throughout these 16 years. Not a given these days, as you know, if you're looking at the international political landscape. This is a woman who not only didn't care about all the frills and all the fancy aspects of this job, she didn't like those, right? She was a no-nonsense, analytical woman, just wanted to get the job done, didn't enjoy the huge perks that come with the office. And you could see her shopping at supermarkets in Berlin without bodyguards, you know. So in that regard, I think that's the one legacy she's leaving, a certain type of politician, right? You don't have to come with 16 bodyguards and 15 Mercedes and so on and so forth, and put on a show of force, right? This is a woman, even at the events that I moderated with her, you barely notice her coming in. All of a sudden, she stood in front of you, you know. There was no huge hurrah, no fanfare. So her style it was a very, you know, down-to-earth style. Now, in terms of more substance, in terms of politics, I think this is a woman who will be remembered as a consensus-driven, solutions-oriented crisis solver. I mean, this is a woman, keep in mind, she had to oversee the Euro crisis, the refugee crisis, you know, so many issues that came her way. The pandemic, of course, that she had to deal with, and she had to bring together 28, now 27 after the departure of the UK, obviously, 27 EU nations, and come up with a unified front and a unanimous decision. As you know, not an easy feast by any means, but she got it done. She got it done most of the times. Having said that, I think the question or the response about the legacy of Merkel is different than if you ask in Paris, in Brussels, or in Athens, or in Budapest and in Prague, okay? Let's be honest. I know, let's say, if you are somebody in Athens, you know, you will probably view her more critically, because you will say, look, the austerity measures that you put in place during the Euro crisis did not help, okay? If you're in Budapest or in Prague, you say, you know, the way you handled the refugee crisis in 2015, you know, was wrong. So I don't think you will have a unanimous opinion on Merkel in Europe. But I think everybody, even her critics, will agree that this is a woman who was not ego-driven. Okay, this is not a woman who was driven by vanity, but she sought solutions. Now,
did she get them all? Not necessarily.
Obviously, she did not. You know, and I don't remember any politician who ever did. Right. But, you know, the one thing I think for us Germans where she surprised us the most was in 2015. Because, you know, up until now, we thought we knew her in a sense. Look, this is a woman who was very risk averse. Okay, she didn't come up with any bold visions for Germany. You know, let's be frank here. You know, this was a woman who, you know, practice politics more according to the definition of Bismarck, namely politics is the art of the possible. You know, it's like, let's see what we can do and let's find a consensus, and even if it's a minimal one, that's what we're going to go with. You know, I never heard in 60, I never heard a fancy speech by her. You know, never heard a charismatic, you know, vision-oriented speech by her. That was not her style, right? So she was a woman who sort of took step-by-step decisions, and only after consulting with everyone. So the 2015 decision, where she out of nowhere sort of practically unanimously decided, you know, we're not closing the borders, we're letting these people in here. That took us Germans by surprise, I'm not going to lie. I think that will be part of her legacy for sure. In her obituary, which hopefully will be a long time from now, I think that will be one of the first sentences, first words and first incidents that will come up.
But did it in some ways cost her popularity as well? In Germany, her party was then losing some ground with the other parties, and then you had obviously the right wing gaining a lot of votes in Germany.
Absolutely. This was not a decision that was unanimously applauded by 82 million Germans. I think that would be false to say. As you say, it gave boost and fuel to the AfD, who, keep in mind, up until then were first and foremost an anti-Europe party, not so much an anti-refugee or xenophobic party. They turned into one opportunistically after the refugee crisis. And it is true, of course, you raise a good point. It is true, of course, that while Angela Merkel led a conservative party, you could argue she herself was not conservative. You could say she was more liberal than her own party base, which of course left a lot of her own voters sometimes dismayed and disappointed, and left a vacuum. It created a vacuum. And you know, in politics, if you create a vacuum, that vacuum will be filled by someone. And yes, she did leave a vacuum on the more conservative-leaning field, which unfortunately was filled by the AfD. So, yeah, absolutely, you raise a good point.
And now, like, her party is going to be in opposition, and she, as you have elections in different lands inside Germany, so she lost some power in some of those lands, right?
No, absolutely, and look at it. I mean, she left, and this would be perhaps, if I were a member of the CDU, that would be my criticism. I would say, yes, you know, I thank you for your service, you know, for 16 years. You led Germany well, but you left the party in shambles, right? I mean, look at it. There was no apparent successor to her. Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, the previous Minister of Defense, was supposed to be the chosen one, but didn't really have the backing and support of her own party. Now we had Armin Laschet, who by all stretch of the imagination was a very decent man and also experienced politician. I mean, he was the prime minister of the largest German state, North Rhine-Westphalia. So again, this is not a rookie we're talking about. But he didn't run a good campaign for certain. And more importantly, Chancellor Merkel didn't really support him as much as probably a lot of Home Party members think she should have. So yes, I mean, the CDU after 16 years of Merkel is not thriving. Quite on the contrary, there's a party that now has to go into opposition, that lost the election, that has to regroup. And I think will have to find its own conservative identity again. They will have to go back to the drawing board and say, look, we were a little bit of power drunk throughout the 16 years. Make no mistake about it. A lot of conservatives within the CDU, they stood still and they kept their mouths shut because Merkel, won elections, right?
Yeah. So by herself.
Yeah, pretty much by herself, exactly, by her personality. A lot of people, I know many people who naturally and normally wouldn't vote for the CDU, voted for Merkel, right? And so, yeah, absolutely right. And so a lot of people within the CDU who would have liked to see a more conservative German party out there, kept their mouth shut because they said, okay, let's not rock the boats. She's winning us elections. But now that she's gone, I think you're going to see a little bit of an inner party revolt. And you already see it. The person who is tapped to be her successor, Friedrich Merz, is certainly somebody I would call a bona fide conservative, no-nonsense conservative from the old school, right? He's one of three candidates going in January when the CDU will elect the new party leader. My guess he will win because there's a yearning within the CDU sort of to push the party again more to the right because they feel the party has been pushed far to the left center. As a matter of fact, there are a couple of people who say, we've had Angela Merkel was the best social democrat Germany has ever had, right? And it is true, of course, her tactic. And that's something Social Democrats always despise about her. Her tactic was very shrewd. She adopted many social democratic positions that were popular. She adopted them and made them their own, right? And so she basically, in those coalitions that she led for 16 years, everything that went right sort of was credited to her, and everything that went wrong was sort of blamed on the junior partners, And so in that regard, yes, your question about the CDU sort of having to go through a reawakening process and redefining their role in German politics is the right one.
I have one more question, and then I'm going to open the floor to our guests. For a certain period of time, like from 2016 until 2020, because the US had elected President Trump as their leader, Ms. Merkel was seen as the leader of the free world. That's quite a big burden to have, let's say.
Absolutely, and I'm not sure she like that title by any stretch of the imagination, because we Germans don't like that. We don't even like the term leadership in the sense that we don't see ourselves as natural leaders out there. The reasons are, of course, mostly historic. We can get into that later if you want. But no, look, I mean, was Chancellor Merkel a respected diplomat out there, a world figure? No doubt. But was the impression of her, or the projection of her, bigger because she was surrounded by Trump, because she was surrounded by Boris Johnson, because she was surrounded by Putin, or like Orban? Yes, I think by default that made her sort of the only adult left in the room, right? The only sober thinking person that people that naturally, who weren't in line ideologically with these people like Trump, Putin, Boris Johnson, who are very different, of course, but you know what I'm saying, the certain style in terms of conducting politics, they gravitated towards her and they said, oh my God, please, Angela Merkel, save us from these people, save us from this world. If it comes down to these people, we are screwed, pardon my French, right? So yes, she was the only adult left in the room, seemingly. By default, of her political peers and their nature and policy styles and leadership styles, I think it made her more of a world leading figure than, to be quite honest, the substance justified, okay? Because on the world stage, I didn't hear Chancellor Merkel weigh in or have a huge impact on the Syria crisis, on Afghanistan, on the world pandemic, on truly global issues, on the Middle East peace process. I did not see and feel the Merkel voice, and to be honest, the German voice for that matter. Okay. Now you can fairly argue, well, that's because Europe was in shambles. We had our own homework to do. We had our own problems. But all I'm trying to say is the role that was attributed to her, sort of the leader of the free world. If you really look down, zoom in and say, is that really true? If you look into the, Germany's contribution to world affairs and world problems, I would say that title was probably too much of an honor.
She didn't really take it.
I think that the record speaks for itself. Again, this is not a criticism of her. This is generally speaking. I mean, Germany, even under Olaf Scholz, is not a country that takes the lead in these kind of things. Because of our history, we've been trained and told to lead from the behind, to act from behind. If you've been told after 45, if you've been told by your allies to sit down and stay out, saying, look, we got this, okay? Just don't cause any more trouble, and you're being told this for 6-7 decades, it does something to your psyche. You raise a generation after generation is being raised by a pacifist attitude, right? Is being raised by an attitude of being followers, not leaders, right? Looking towards Washington for solutions. And now overnight you're saying, you're the leader. It doesn't work like that,
No, thank you.
Yeah, well,
let Trump be.
Yeah, let America take place. Let NATO take place. Let the EU, because Germany more than anything sees itself as a team player. It might be the most populous and most affluent European nation out there, but it is first and foremost a team player. We're not comfortable with the position of, slamming our fist on the table and sort of saying the German way. It didn't work for us in the past.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, lessons learned for certain.
So I'm going to open the floor first to Besa for her comments and questions.
About the CDU, and I just wanted to ask, would you say that, for example, thanks to Merkel, then also the Social Democrats now won and are coming in power, and what do you expect? Many things will change, or because, as you explained, most of the people thought that Merkel was one of the Social Democrats.
Right.
Will that continue?
Yeah.
And also something about the role of Germany now under Olaf Scholz within the European Union. As we from the Balkans can see, when Ms. Merkel was, let's say, one of the most important leaders for Europe, and she tried to have a unified position, in many things she couldn't. For example, we as Kosovo do not have the visa liberalization, and she also couldn't do that. What do you think? Will that role in unifying Europe again vis-à-vis the Western Balkans and the integration of the last remaining countries will change, or will be the same?
Thank you so much, Besa, for those questions. Well, look, let's go through them one by one. First of all, your question about whether Merkel sort of is to be blamed for Olaf Scholz's success. I wouldn't go as far as that, but let me take the opportunity to point out that Olaf Scholz, being the new chancellor, having been sworn in as the new chancellor, is nothing short of a miracle. And I tell you why. Because even 6 months ago, even his most ardent supporters, even the most die-hard social democrat, my opinion, would not have bet much money on the fact that Olaf Scholz would be the 9th post-war German chancellor. The social democrats, 6, 7, 8 months ago, were seen as an obsolete party, as an outdated party.
They were bad in polls in every poll.
They were bad in polls. They were lagging behind. They lost their moral and moral compass. People were even asking, what do we need the Social Democrats for still? Okay, and Olaf Scholz was supposed to be the 3rd running candidate who, will be in the mix. It was very clear for us journalists as well, that the race will be won between Armin Laschet from the CDU or Annalena Baerbock from the Greens, who is riding a high because climate change, green-related issues were on the high, and she was a young, fresh face, a woman, and so sort of she had momentum going in. But, and politics is a strange thing, as you will know, those two candidates, Armin Laschet and Annalena Baerbock, made huge mistakes, one after another. They ran, in my opinion, terrible campaigns. Annalena Baerbock, for instance, now first female foreign minister, of course, she embellished her resume, her CV on her website. She published a book where, you know, some quotes were plagiarized, you know. I mean, these things that Germans don't, really are very lenient on, you know, because their thinking is, well, if you're lying about this, if you're exaggerating about this, what else are you lying and exaggerating about? And Armin Laschet, you know, we had a huge flooding catastrophe in Germany, as you know, this past summer. And Armin Laschet on the sidelines was caught by cameras laughing, okay? Now, of course, he wasn't laughing at the dismal situation, that goes without saying, but you know, as a journalist, the power of images, you know, cannot be overcome. And I tell you, Jamal, he never recovered from those images again, because he was seen as somebody who's not up to the task, right? You are there for the flooding, you know, speaking, you know, expressing your condolences to the victims' families, and then you're on the sidelines, you're laughing. He never recovered from that. His election was doomed from there on, right? And so really, bit by bit, like one of those Pac-Man, you know, games, all of a sudden, Olaf Scholz, you know, sort of, you know, like a horse race, came from behind, and because people are like, okay, we got Armin Laschet, he's not Chancellor material, he's laughing when he should be, when he shouldn't. You have Annalena Baerbock, who's embellishing her CV, and then you have an uncharismatic Olaf Scholz, but at least he's not doing dumb things, right? And then we were like, you know what?
He's the one.
We might go with him. Right? And then you had those 3 televised national debates where there weren't huge blunders on all 3 sides, but there weren't none points scored either. There was no candidate where you go like, wow, that person really blew me away. So the momentum, I would say, you know, 3 months before the election, started to shift all of a sudden towards Social Democrats. I have many Social Democratic members of parliament friends, you know, in Berlin, and even they told me off the record, you know, they're like, Ali, we can't believe what is happening, you know, we might win this election. And there you are, you know, Olaf Scholz being the candidate. So this was a long answer to your question. No, I don't think Angela Merkel should be blamed for Olaf Scholz's victory. I think the 2 candidates, you know, his opponents really ran bad campaigns. Your second question about, you know, changes, right? Look, don't expect, you know, many changes in Germany. For one, we Germans, by definition, politically speaking, are very change and risk averse. Right? I always say, half jokingly, because I lived in the United States for a very long time, and if you want to run a campaign, political campaign in the United States, whether you're president, you're a senator, you're a congressman, or even on a council level, the #1 word you will have to constantly repeat throughout your speech is change. Right? You have to keep saying, and with me, there's going to be change. There's going to be change for the better, change we can believe in. Right? Barack Obama. The one word, so the word that gets you elected in the US is change. The word that makes you lose elections in Germany is change. Okay? You cannot go into an election saying, you know what? When you elect me, everything's going to change. They're like, we don't want that, trust me.
We're good.
We're good. So we are a very status quo driven nation, right? It is not so much about doing wild things and changing crazy things. It's more about protecting and preserving the level that we've already achieved. And any candidate coming in knows this, right? Any candidate, you know, you won't have any candidate coming in and saying, you know, this is my bold vision for Germany, you know? It's more like saying, look, you know, Germany, we're doing well, but I think we can do a slightly better in this regard or that regard. Minimal steps, right? So no, you're not going to see big changes, neither domestically nor in terms of foreign policy, and that's your last question. about whether you're going to see changes on that front, you know.
And there is a special alliance that Chancellor Merkel had with President Macron of France.
Yes.
And this special relation, obviously, between Germany and France, how is that going to prosper, let's say, or how is it going to be with the new government?
No, I don't think it's gonna change one bit. Look, there are a few bedrocks of German foreign policy, for a few cornerstones that will never change, whether it's Merkel, Scholz, or Ali Aslan, right? It will never change. One is the emphasis and the value and emphasis being placed on transatlantic relations, right? The special relationship with Washington is non-negotiable, no matter, you know, whether the president, the chancellor is from the Green Party, from the SPD, or from the CDU. The second non-negotiable one is Germany is a staunchly pro-European party, pro-European nation, okay? We are pro-EU, we want the EU to prosper, we want the EU to be strengthened, right? Again, that cannot be tainted with. So these are the bedrocks, you know, and in these, of course, you have the Franco-German relationship, which is being, you know, carries a certain special weight within European Union relations. So, no, I don't expect any changes whatsoever. You're gonna see this government hit the ground running very quickly. You already see Annalena Baerbock was in Paris. It's my understanding Olaf Scholz is meeting with Macron. I think even today or tomorrow or something like that. On the foreign policy front, you're not going to see much changes. Here are the changes, at least in terms of tonality, you might see within the next 16 years, next years, compared to the previous 16 years, is in our dealings with Russia and China, right? And at least on paper, okay, our new foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, has made it clear that she and her own party are going to focus and run a very human rights-driven foreign policy. Right? So what that means really in translation is, yes, even though China is our largest trading partner, we will not stay silent if and when rights are being trampled in Hong Kong, Taiwan, or in the Uyghurs situation. Yes, you know, Russia is you know, force to be reckoned with, but we will, and we have Nord Stream 2 to deal with. But we will not stay silent if you amass Russian troops on the Ukrainian border, okay? Now, that is different because Angela Merkel, she certainly didn't turn a blind eye towards it, but I think it's certainly throughout the latter stages of her chancellor career, she had a much more realpolitik approach towards it, meaning when she met with Xi Jinping, she didn't give him a long lecture about human rights, right? Because I think she was prudent, if you will, or realistic, or whatever word you want to call, enough to know, look, whatever I say is not going to, you know, change, you know. Same with Putin, right? We can slap as many sanctions on him as we want. Certainly this man has his own agenda for his country and his relationship with Europe and so on and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see, because Olaf Scholz, who, make no mistake about it, is in the driver's seat when it comes to foreign policy. We have this beautiful German word called Richtlinienkompetenz, which basically means that the chancellor is the one setting the course, not the foreign minister, not the finance minister, right? Yeah. They are working in the German foreign ministry. But even on Nord Stream 2, let me give you a specific example.
What's happening?
I mean, you're going to see there's a potential clash of interest in this three-way coalition, right? Because Olaf Scholz and the SPD is not opposed to Nord Stream 2, whereas the Greens and the FDP are. Right?
So two out of the three governing coalition
parties. The Greens
parties.
Probably much more against it than the FDP. So the Greens have always been against it. Said we shouldn't do it. We have no illusions about how Russia is going to use this pipeline. Namely, they're going to use it as a political force, as an extortion means and tool in the coming years. Now, Chancellor Merkel, you know, she blocked that out and she supported the pipeline. She went with it. But I think, you know, politics, again, sometimes things change and then the dynamic changes. hypothetically speaking, if Russia were to invade Ukraine, I think even a Chancellor Olaf Scholz would have a tough time justifying going ahead with Nord Stream 2, right? Regardless of the costs that have already been invested in this very ambitious energy project. And the other thing is, of course, as I pointed out, China is our largest trading partner. Now, Olaf Scholz, when he meets with Xi Jinping, he will have this in the back of his mind, of course. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, Germany, even in the 21st century, is first and foremost a hardware nation. We're not a software nation, meaning what are we known for? What does our economy stand on? What is the backbone of our business? It is hardware, it is cars, it is machines, it is you know, tools, right? And we are dependent as one of the largest exporting nations out there on China, on making use of this large market. Now, will we sacrifice as Germans, right, our own prosperity, you know, for the good of the people of Taiwan and Hong Kong and then the Uyghur people? That is the $1 billion question, or rather the $200 billion question here on the table. And that is going to be interesting to see, Jamal, whether, you know, yes, you can say you're going to have a value and human rights-driven foreign policy, but that is on paper. Let's see how much of it actually is being implemented and how much is it worth to see play out in the next 4 years.
Bessa, the other Bessa.
Mr. Aslan, I have 3 short questions. One is, having seen the position, the stabilizing position that Chancellor Merkel has put Germany in, also internally but also externally as a stabilizing factor, not just for Europe but globally, do you think Chancellor Scholz can keep it up or maybe take it to the next level? That's my first question. My second question is, you mentioned the human rights foreign policy, human rights focused foreign policy. Western Balkans, and especially Kosovo, as a country that's fulfilled all the criteria for visa liberalization, which we consider a basic freedom of movement right, not a privilege, has not happened for us for a long time, despite promises because of political implications, non-recognizing countries, and so forth and so on. Do you think that Germany, as a country that's played such a huge role in Kosovo's development and stability, could and should have a more involved role in making sure that at least such a need is met? We understand everyone has experienced the pandemic and how isolating that is. For Kosovars, they've been living in isolation for very many years now. So I'd like to hear your opinion on that. And thirdly, you mentioned that the one thing that Germany has a non-negotiable stance on it is the relationship with the United States. Now, our new government has just refused this US proposal for a pipeline to go through Kosovo. What's your stand on that? Do you think that's a smart move, considering that US is our strategic partner and very crucial to the peace, stability, and development of Kosovo?
You mean your government?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that you'll understand is pretty difficult for me to answer. But let me try to address some of the questions. Stability, as you pointed out. Chancellor Merkel certainly stood for stability. Germany stands for stability. And no, I don't foresee any changes there. I mean, you have to understand, if you have observed Olaf Scholz, now Chancellor Olaf Scholz, of course, for the better part of his career, he very much actually, both in terms of style and nature, resembles Merkel. I would even say he became even more Merkelian, you know, throughout the campaign. He saw this as a proven, this is a successful formula, right? And so no, my answer is I don't expect any changes as far as Germany being a stabilizing force out there in international affairs. I think Germany's role, or the role that Germany has played throughout 16 years, will be very much the same with the Chancellor Scholz in the Kanzleramt. And anyway, as I pointed out before, Germany regardless of who's the chancellor, is not one to make any rash decisions on the international stage anyway, right? I mean, keep in mind, we are a nation that is more or less, you know, observing the landscape and then attaching ourselves then to a multilateral response or approach, whether that is a NATO-led mission in Afghanistan or in Kosovo or an EU-driven you know, approach in other countries, mission in Palestine and so on and so forth. This is what Germany is, right? And this is what Germany has conducted. So no, I don't foresee much progress on that. Now, we are in Kosovo today, so your question about the Western Balkans and visa liberalization is of course very justified. Let me just point this out. I mean, if you had a look at the new coalition agreement, right? The Western Balkans and Kosovo is actually mentioned by name, you know. This is not a given, trust me. I mean, there are many countries and regions that have not been mentioned in this coalition agreement. And what I'm trying to tell you is that this government has the Western Balkans on their radar, okay? I fully understand the special role and value that Chancellor Merkel is being placed upon in this region here. You know, it's not called the Berlin process for nothing. We know this. But, and obviously she couldn't deliver on all fronts because of the lack of unanimity. But I think if I were from Kosovo, if I were from Macedonia or Bosnia and Herzegovina, I would see it as a very positive sign that this region, and Kosovo in particular, was mentioned by name with the right message in this coalition agreement. Namely, yes, we as Germany, you know, expressively support the accession talks. We want to open up chapters with Macedonia and Albania. We want visa liberalization for Kosovo. We want to move forward on this front. Now, the EU being the EU, whether actually Germany can succeed in Brussels coming together, hashing these out, that of course is on another page. That's a different story. But I think if this government would have sort of completely overlooked this region and not mentioned it in the coalition agreement, then I think I would be like, oh, you know, maybe we will see some changes after Merkel. We will be ignored, we will be forgotten. But I think from reading the document that I'm reading, frankly speaking, I think it's a good sign, and hopefully things will move sooner than later. Yeah.
Anyone else? Jack? Microphone, Besa.
And by the way, let me just point out one more thing about the question about Western Balkans. I think this government also properly understands that bringing in those 6 Western Balkan nations into the European Union is not an act of, you know, benign, you know, generosity, but of geostrategic importance and interest for the EU itself. Okay, I think that's properly understood. Those in the foreign policy circles know that, again, I told you before, if there's a vacuum, that vacuum will be filled in politics, both domestically and internationally. And we are aware that Russia and China and other forces, whether it's through force or through soft power, through economic means, through the Orthodox Church, through whatever means, are trying to put their foot down and expand their sphere of influence here. And that is something that a weakening European Union, where we've already lost the UK, cannot afford. So that is just something that I want to add. So I think that process has to move forward, not just to make Kosovo happy, not just to make people in Pristina, in Sarajevo or in Podgorica happy, but, you know, for our own geostrategic interest as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I am from the UK, and I wanted to firstly say a comment that I can really relate to the German desire for stability, because we seem to have a different political scandal every day at the moment, and I think people are getting exhausted there as well. So I think that's certainly something that is very relatable. I actually had a question about political trends more generally, and whether you see the German election results as a product of unique circumstances with the German electorate and the German political scene, or is it something that you see as more of a bounce back of the left in Europe or more widely globally?
Frankly, I don't. I think, and I thought, you know, I think I alluded a bit in my answer. I think this election by the Social Democrats, and I say this even with the banner of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung behind my back, I think it was a bit of a fluke. okay, was a bit of a, as I was saying, it was a result of forces that even Olaf Scholz could not have foreseen, meaning, you know, numerous mistakes and blunders made by his political opponents and his competition. So is Germany moving towards a, you know, a newly found appreciation for social democracy? I mean, Germany is a social democratic country no matter what, right? Even Chancellor Merkel or any other ones, it is a bedrock of our foundation. But are we moving towards the left? You know, is this an indication for other countries also to follow in the UK and France and so on and so forth? My hunch is no. I mean, look at France, right? Look at Eric Zemmour. You know, what could be, God forbid, a year from now. You know, and the pandemic, in my opinion, if anything, has probably made countries, you know, more edgy, more conservative in the sense that more nationalistic, inward-looking, you know. So the short answer would be no. I don't think Olaf Scholz's victory is sort of like a torch-carrying signal for all the left-leaning parties, all the social democrats, liberals out there in Europe. I don't foresee that because the victory was not resoundingly enough, you know. It was, again, more, I think, a result of internal German, you know, consequences and coincidences that took place. But I feel you about the UK. You know, I mean, look, make no mistake about it. You know, I mean, we can joke all day long about Boris Johnson and, you know, his haircut and what a doofus he is and so on and so forth. But losing the UK is a huge blow to the European Union. Okay. You know, like in any other divorce, you know, no one will admit, you know, they'll say, oh, I'll be fine without you, you know, good riddance. But if you talk to politicians in Europe, and it's not just a huge blow because, you know, the UK was the second largest net contributor to the EU budget, because it to the EU army, for the lack of a better term, you know. But also, it hurt our standing, you know, soft power-wise. You know, what does it say if a country like the UK doesn't want to be part of this union anymore? You know, I mean, look, the European Union is not a hard power, right? We're not a military power. We are first and foremost a soft power, meaning we shine through our values, our ideals, right? We are a beacon of hope, if you will, you know, if I can use pathos here in Kosovo, for other countries that are looking towards democracy and liberal rights and freedom of speech and freedom of media and respect of sexual orientation and so on and so forth, right? I mean, I think that's what we still do well as Europeans. And if a country like the UK says, I don't want to be part of this club anymore, it hurts us, right? It hurts us in terms of standing, let alone the numbers, let alone the money, let alone the budget. Put that aside, you know. It just means, you know, we're no longer as sexy and attractive, frankly, as we once were. You know, that's something that is regrettable, to put it mildly.
Anyone else? Okay, I want to ask you about Turkey. Obviously, your country of origin, it's been decades waiting for you right now. There's a big downfall of Turkish lira. What's happening?
Look, I think even in Ankara, I mean, in this particular point and juncture, there's no illusion about moving forward in EU accession talks, EU accession process. I mean, that process is frozen. Some say it's clinically dead. It's on life support. It's in coma. Whatever term you want to use. Clearly, it is not on the agenda. It's not on the agenda of Brussels. And trust me, it's not even on the agenda of Ankara at this particular point.
They just gave up.
No, look, I think, and let me be honest and blunt here, I think it's regrettable that we are at this juncture in EU-Turkish relations. And the blame is 50-50, to be quite honest. And I say this as German, as a European citizen. I tell you why. When Turkey joined or started the accession talks in 2004, right? So a long time ago. You had somewhat of a perfect storm. You know, the stars were aligned for Turkey. What does it mean? In Germany, you had Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, who was pro Turkish EU membership. In France, you had Jacques Chirac, who was pro-Turkish EU membership. And in the UK, you had Tony Blair, who was pro-Turkish. So already you had the three powerhouses of EU, never mind objection from Athens or other country. But you had the backing and support to at least start accession talks, right? But again, I come down to the fact that, you know, faces, names, and leadership matter, right? What happened? Gerhard Schröder lost his seat to Angela Merkel, who, in my opinion, in terms of foreign policy, made a mistake by immediately ruling out Turkish EU membership. She didn't say, let's see and wait out the results of these accession talks. She said, let's offer the Turks privileged partnership, okay?
But not membership.
But not membership. Then Jacques Chirac lost, and in came Sarkozy. And the first things he said is, not on my watch. Turkey's never going to become. So, so what are you left with? Right? That's what I'm saying. Names, faces, leaderships matter. Right? So the same constellation that propelled Turkey in 2004 into this advantageous position, you know, were rendered useless and meaningless, you know, once the German and French incumbent lost their election. And from there on, I think the waters were muddled and poisoned by this talk of privileged partnership, which was never on the table, which kept being introduced into the discussion, and which pretty much, this is not in defense of Turkey, but it was an insult, okay? It was an insult. You start accession talks, and then a few years later you say, oh, you know what, you know, it's like, look, if you and I are engaged, right, you know, and we're moving towards marriage, right, and I say, you know what, let's not call it marriage, let's call it privileged partnership, right? Without a wedding, you know. Don't tell your friends we're married, right? Tell them we're in a privileged partnership, right? You'll be like, are you crazy? You
It's
know?
not the same thing, obviously.
It's not the same thing, of course it isn't, you know? And so, and by the way, forget Erdogan. The Turkish public was insulted. And they lost enthusiasm for membership. And they said, and pretty much maybe something that in this part of the world can be felt at times. They say, we cannot trust you, you know?
We deliver, you don't deliver.
Yeah,
That's what Kosovo says to EU.
You know,
we did fulfill all the criteria for visa liberalization, and still there is no decision.
Your word is worth nothing. You know, what is the paper worth, the ink worth that the paper is written on? Make no mistake about it. I'm not, you know, justifying deficiencies in democracy and human rights in Turkey. Clearly, Turkey has to do its homework, had to do its homework, and has to do its homework. That goes without saying, like any other country in the Western Balkans. But if you are from the get-go not negotiating in good faith, as the EU has done after Schröder and Chirac left, you know, I think you're setting a bad precedent. So long story short, moving forward to 2021, no, I don't foresee any changes whatsoever with Olaf Scholz or this new government.
What's his position towards Turkey?
Look, you know, this is actually one of those topics where you don't have to have a position anymore. You know, you can afford the luxury of not having a position because the position is so obvious. It's so obvious, it's understood by any 5-year-old that, you know, me saying, you know, that this is red, you know, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of everyone's time. So Turkey is usually one of the most discussed foreign policy items in German election campaigns. Also because you have a huge Turkish diaspora there with 2.5 million. This time, not once has Turkey been mentioned. And that tells you everything you need to know. That tells you everything you need to know, that there's an understanding on both sides of the aisle, both in Germany, in Brussels, and frankly also in Ankara. This is certainly one thing I can tell you when I visit Turkey, when I go to Turkey and visit my relatives and talk to my peers and so on and so forth. What I regret the most is, and by the way, I see parallels to the United States, a country where I've also lived for 13, 14 years, is you have a huge political polarization that even goes through families, okay? So right now, before it was, you know, whether you voted for Clinton or George Bush, okay, was something that we could discuss over dinner amongst friends. right? Whether you're voting for Trump or Biden now makes the difference whether you are even in my social circle or not, okay? And it's the same in Turkey. That is something I regret, you know? You don't see much overlapping anymore. If you are, you know, voting for the AKP, if you're pro-Erdogan, that is some, you know, or if you're against him and you want to see him out of office, those sides, unfortunately, in terms of discourse, no longer overlap and don't see themselves no longer as merely political opponents, but as, you know, for lack of a better term, enemies, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, political adversaries, you know, in the sense that, look, you and I have nothing in common, right? Your vision, if you're a Trump supporter, you know, I don't even want you on my timeline on Facebook, okay? I don't want you in my club. I don't want you, and you know, this creates, and again, I see the parallels in, I know 3 countries quite well, Germany, the US, and Turkey. And in the 2 countries, the US and Turkey, I see a very dangerous tendency, namely where you only talk to those who are agreeing with you politically, okay? And you see this in Turkey, and you see this in the United States, you know, and that is, regardless of which country we're talking about, that is never healthy. Because look, Erdogan will come and go. No one has ever survived political office. You know, Churchill hasn't survived political office, George Washington hasn't survived political office, Konrad Adenauer has, right? These are political figures who come, they stay for 10 years, 20 years, 4 years, whatever, and then they go. But, you know, the damage that the reparation process, and you see it even in the United States now with the President Biden, where, you know, it is, the wealth is completely poisoned, okay? And it's going to take some time, for the United States to move beyond this, because there are a lot of people, and now I'm speaking much more generally, if I may, about the state of democracy worldwide. Okay, I mean, that is something, if we would have, you know, if you would have told me a few years back, we're going to sit in Kosovo in 2021 and be concerned about the state of democracy in the United States, you know, I would be like, come on, you know. That's
in Kosovo? Come on.
Yeah. But here we are, my friend, you know. Yeah, and this is what I'm telling you, you know, I think, you know, we're seeing a trend. You see it in Hungary, you see it in Poland, you know, with authoritarian tendencies, with the undermining of the independent judiciary. This is happening today within the European Union, okay? Where European Union members, even Germany and France, have no answer to right now. They don't have the mechanisms how to deal with these, because we didn't foresee that a country that would be joining the European Union would be acting actively against our own interests, against our own values, right? And that is, generally speaking, something that worries me, frankly, as a European, as somebody who values the European Union so much, who thinks that we need the European Union, because on our own, and now I'm speaking as a German, who are we? We're nothing. We're completely irrelevant. We Germans know this. Who will listen to us on the international stage? But as Europe, we could have a voice. But we will only have a voice, Jamal, and this is an important point. We will only have a voice if we get our house in order, if we get our own act together. Because as it stands, and it pains me to say this, Germany is not acting in an adult fashion right now, right? This whole notion of Fukuyama, that, you know, we're all going to be living in this liberal democratic utopia, you know, where we're holding hands and walking towards Disneyland, you know, unfortunately that didn't turn out to be true. Quite on the contrary. Now we're living in times where Germany and Europe is surrounded by sharks, surrounded by lions who are, you know, marching to their own drum. You know, and who don't care about your values, you know, they care about harsh geostrategic, real political interests, okay? And as I said before, we are a soft power, but we have to learn, against our nature, we have to also learn to be a hard power, because threats are nothing if you can't back them up, particularly at a time when Washington, our #1 ally and biggest supporter, whom we relied on for 7, 8 decades, is seemingly and obviously withdrawing from world events, okay? If you look at it, there is no appetite in Washington anymore for any huge international engagement.
Didn't that change when Biden was elected?
Absolutely not.
Got back to the Paris climate...
In rhetoric. Look, make no mistake about it. Joe Biden is America first. It's just more polite, okay?
Just like Trump. America first.
It's not about Trump. And, this process, in all fairness to Trump, meaning the withdrawal of America from world events, started way before Trump. Where was America under Obama in Syria? Okay? Nowhere. Bush left a mess behind, okay, by entering Iraq and Afghanistan and so on and so forth. And Obama was more than anything a domestic president with a domestic agenda whose #1 foreign policy priority was towards Asia Pacific, was towards the Asia Pacific region, something that is very true for Joe Biden, okay? Don't be fooled. America's Washington's priority #1 is China and nothing else, right? And their interest in Europe these days is only so far as to say, when we're moving against China, whether it's a diplomatic boycott of their Winter Olympics or whatnot, are you with us or are you against us?
Kosovo joined already the boycott.
Well, there you go.
Because it was asked by US, obviously.
Yeah. But let me just make that final point, about... so Europe has to read the writing on the wall, okay? It is a painful one for a continent that sees itself first and defines itself first and foremost as a political software power, not as a military one. Something, by the way, Macron, whether you're a critic of him or a proponent of him, has understood, okay? He has understood. And by the way, of course, the French have global leadership comes more natural to them. It's in their DNA, France, vive la France, #1. So he's the one who went to Merkel many times and said, look, we need to have a solid EU army, strategic autonomy. We have to have a national EU, meaning we have a United States of Europe. We have to cede power from the national governments to Brussels, We have to have a truly EU foreign minister, not one just like a high representative who is not equipped with any authority, right? He said this numerous times, and he fell on deaf ears in Berlin, right? Merkel blocked every single attempt of his, and my suspicion is so will Olaf Scholz. Because when you're hearing a supranational EU, what Germans hear are, oh, more money. We have to pay more money, right? What does it get us in return? Because trust me, when push comes to shove, God forbid, the Germans will first and foremost look towards Washington, not Paris, okay? And this is something Macron, who, in my opinion, read the writing on the wall correctly, was saying, look, we can no longer rely on the United States as much as we used to, right? They've taken their eye off the ball. We're entering a new Cold War in the 21st century. This time it's not the Soviet Union. This time it's a much more assertive and confident, self-confident China that the United States is dealing with. This is what their focus is going to be on. And our role, very much like in the previous century, will be, are we with the US or are we against them? He read the room correctly and he said, if we want to be taken serious in international affairs out there, with an India that is growing more bold, with a Brazil that is growing more bold, with sharks, as I told you, who are out there, defending their interests, you better grow up as the European Union, because as France, you are nothing but a fly. As Germany, you're nothing but a fly. But if you are combined, and that is something that I'm looking towards my UK friend here, that is something that the UK will learn the hard way. They thought we're going to leave the EU, take the country back, take freedom back, we're going to be, no, this isn't the British Empire anymore, my friend. You know, wake up and smell the coffee. That train has left the station a long time ago. You're going to be a nation of 60 million people, you know, who will have great music, wonderful theater and
great football
and movies, decent football.
Oh, come on! They have the greatest.
Decent football, you know. Let's not get in our head. You know, practice penalties first. You know. They're decent football. They're terrible food. But I mean, it's no. I mean, look. All joking aside, the Brits will, and they you know, in secret, and I think they're smart enough because they're smart people, one of the best educated in the world. They know this, right? They know this. They're like, oh my God, we might have bet on the wrong horse here with a doofus like Nigel Farage and so on and so forth. You know, they're like, oh, and now they're busy trying to hatch bilateral agreements with 200 countries out there, you know? I mean, this is ridiculous in this day and age. You had to stay in the European Union. Not out of a benign, you know, general. You have, look, this is, I'm sorry, Fukuyama was wrong, okay? I wish he was right. You know, I wish we didn't have to look behind our shoulders and see where the next threat is coming from. By the way, in this day and age, you know just as well as I do, the next threat is not even the military one, right? Even Brexit, the vote, people now, analysts say, was influenced by cyber attack, by fake news, you know, these kind of things. You know, this is the hybrid warfare in the 21st century. You know, this is what we ought to be concerned with. This is something that the power and the fuel that a party like the AfD feeds off. This is something like a candidate like Eric Zemmour, and before him Le Pen was feeding off. There are people who want to divide and weaken the European Union. Wake up! You know, this is not a party. You know, this is warfare. And this is why I'm saying I worry a little bit about the European Union, because I'm not sure, not only has it not been fully understood in all capitals, in all 27 capitals, but there are even countries within the European Union who are working actively against our values, against our goals, right? So let's hope, because if and when the EU breaks up, or is weakened, or is rendered useless, you know, then we're entering a phase where it really just comes down to, you know, who has the bigger muscle and chauvinism and, you know, and this is, I think, nobody wants. This is something that nobody wants. So as a German and European, certainly that's something I'm concerned about.
We're in the last 10 minutes or so to say of this talk. I want to talk with you about the media, about your work. You've been working for CNN, ABC News, Deutsche Welle for many years. So we have journalists here, and we want your experience on how is it like you shared the stage with world leaders and had the chance to interview them. What's the experience?
No, it's been a wonderful ride. I mean, look, in this stage, and I think I speak for everyone here, it is the best profession in the world once you get there. Yeah. You know, once you can live of it, okay? It takes a long time to get to a stage where you can say, oh, I enjoy this, I can live off this, you know? I can, as a means of income, is letting me do what I want to do. I know so many talented young journalists throughout the years. I met them throughout the years, even those I've started out with, who unfortunately at some point said, you know what, Ali, I love this, but you know, my landlord doesn't care that I'm a journalist. He wants to see the rent, okay? And then they went on to join corporations or became spokesperson or went to the media department. Do I blame them? No. This is a harsh business. Okay, this is a tough business that generally doesn't pay very well. Not only doesn't it pay very well, in some countries you don't even get any appreciation, any respect, if you're not even persecuted. So it's a wonderful profession. It's one of the oldest professions out there. It's one of the most important professions out there, because we have to, you know, hold the fire, you know, to the feet of those in charge, right, in power. Something they, of course, never like, right? So you're constantly in a position where, you know, they're trying to keep you out or down but no, I've been fortunate. I've been blessed, you know, in a sense that it was tough. Trust me, I mean, there were times when I did the overnight shift, you know, at CNN, where I started at midnight until 8 a.m. You know, there were a couple of times where he said, this cannot be it. He said, this is journalism, you know, this is what everybody's talking about, you know, getting, you know, $800 in a month when your rent in New York costs $1,000, you know.
You're in minus there.
Yeah, you were pretty much, yeah, but look, it is, I think it is a great profession out there. And yes, I value sharing the stage with Clinton, with Merkel, Macron, Trudeau, you know, Lagarde. It's been wonderful, but you know, you have a job to do. You know, you cannot get caught up in mind games. You're gonna get caught up in and so many times I see this with colleagues who, honest to God, they start falling in love with themselves. You know, the vanity aspect of this profession is also a dangerous one. You know, I see particularly those who've made it. You know, they love the camera a bit too much. You know, they love seeing their names as a columnist a little bit too much. You know, and sometimes, you know, and I've seen them say, they think at some point it's about them. You know, when they're sitting in front and doing the interview. And to that I always say, because I speak to a lot of young journalists in classrooms, I said, always keep in mind, never is it about you.
You're not the news.
You're not the news. And if you start thinking you are the news, start looking for another profession. When you enter a room, you are the least important person in that room there. You have a job to do. Get the job done, get the hell out, right?
Okay, I'm leaving.
But no, so many times, I mean, you know it as well, Jamal. I've watched your show. You're doing a wonderful job, you know. But so many times you have moderators, you know, they take 10 minutes to ask a question, right? Because you know it's not about the question they really want to ask. It's about hearing themselves talk and letting everybody know how much they know. And I'm sorry, that's BS, you know.
I want to ask you, has your name ever been an issue in Germany or US? Your heritage? You know, we live in a...
Look, of course, I don't live in fantasy land, you know. I mean, my name is Ali. There's no hiding behind this name.
It's a beautiful name.
No, thank you. But I'm saying it's not a name where you're like, I guess where he's from, you know. It's not one of those names, you know. It's Ali. You know, you have at least Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, Muslim background, one of those, right? Has it ever been an issue? Frankly, if it had been, I don't know. You know, I'm sure it was. I'm not naive enough not to think that it never was. But I'm here now today, am I not? So apparently the quality of the work at some point spoke for itself, and it overcame the burdens, if you will, and the disadvantages of my name. So that's what I always believe, generally speaking, not just with myself. I think quality always finds a way. You know, good work will find a way, will be recognized in the end. It might take a while. And people, there will always be people who will try to hold you back. I'm sure you know this. Everybody in this room knows this. There will be an editor-in-chief who will promote you, and there will be an editor-in-chief who are trying to put you down, right? That's the nature of the beast. Journalists, and again, we're not better people, you know, than other professions out there. Another illusion that some of us have, right? We think that badge of journalism entitles us, you know, we're out in certain circles. They're aloof. They don't go anymore where the story is. You know, they are, you know, thinking of themselves as being part of the elite, you know, and then the result are elitist stories. Okay, that are detached. Why is that dangerous for democracy? Because then you have Trump voters, you know, you have Boris Johnson voters, and somebody in the UK who lives in Leeds and not London, right? And lives in Newcastle and not Birmingham, and thinks, I'm not reflected in this story, you know. Do we need, is the #1 story today whether the language is gender correct, you know, when I can't put food on the table, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm not making fun of these kind of things, but I think at some point, at least in the Western world, I cannot speak, but in some of the Western world and some of the German media, we have lost course as journalists. What is it about, right? We have become too chummy, frankly, also with politicians. In Berlin, you see them at parties together, laughing together, having coffee. I'm sorry, that's not your job, right? Your job is to question that person.
Yeah.
You know, not to be critical for the sake of being critical.
But because they are in power, they make the decisions.
They're in power. That is your job. That is the definition of being a journalist, right? You are out there. You are an advocate not of the politician or the movie star. You're the advocate of the person on the street. And too much in this day and age, if I'm reading the New York Times, if I'm watching CNN, I don't see that reflected, to be quite honest. Quite on the contrary, I see journalists making fun of the person on the street. Yes, they're making fun, laughing at Trump supporters, belittling them. Sorry, that is not your freaking job. And your job is to report on what is going on. We can argue, look at the United States. Journalism, in my opinion, sanity in journalism has left the room long time ago. I mean, it's unwatchable. My former colleagues at CNN, it's not the CNN that I left. They've become cheerleaders they were cheerleaders against Trump for 4 years. Now, of course, narcissistic human being Trump is. Of course we can do this, and it wouldn't be wrong. But that your job is to focus on policies, right? And not to, everybody now in this day and age wants to be a Twitter star, wants to be. Before this, I wouldn't even know what the personal political leaning of a journalist was, Now that's the first thing that you get to know. That's the first thing you're being shoved down your throat. I'm sorry, Jake Tapper and Don Lemon, and I don't want to know your political leaning. This profession, but it has to be done. And I think we in the Western world, in the U.S. for sure, where it's no longer news, objective news. It's just basically. You're the channel of one part, of the right or the left.
Well,
that's
especially
it.
in US, it's left and right, all the media.
Absolutely, and in Germany and in Europe, unfortunately, also, it's very mainstream news, that you're getting. Where sometimes I feel they are spending way too much time and coverage on luxury problems that we're having. Let me point another criticism I have. Of colleagues of mine is throughout this pandemic. I don't think we played a constructive role here, to be quite honest. I think the coverage was very panic-driven. Now that is not to belittle. Don't get me wrong. This is not to belittle or trivialize this pandemic. Of course, it's a serious health-related crisis that the whole world has gone through. People are dying. No one's denying that, right? But is there a way of reporting on it? A somber way of reporting on it. I think that, they could have done a better job, But just as well as I do, it's not just about the reporting, and this is a problem I want to touch upon, is, of course, it is about business also. It is about business. Even the New York Times has to sell subscriptions in newspapers, otherwise it doesn't exist anymore, right? And the CNN has to sell advertising, otherwise it doesn't exist anymore. And they're seeing, and this is why, by the way, all those CNN people, they're missing Donald Trump, trust me.
Yeah, because the ratings
have gone down, right? Now the boogeyman has left the room, right? And this is what I'm saying. But this is bad, this is bad for democracy, because now, you're covering the pandemic 24 hours, wall to wall, sometimes contradicting messages within one article even. You're like, wait, what? But it doesn't matter, because they've noticed pandemic-related news people click on. They watch on. It's being watched longer. Trump-related news being watched on, The more Hollywood, being watched. And I'm sorry?
Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, Harry and Meghan, you know, again, one of the, you know, two most irrelevant people in the world. Now it's CNN. There's no difference. Yeah, it's CNN Daily. There's no difference anymore. And this is the criticism I have. Boulevard News and Hard News are now one and the same. I understand the rationale. I'm not naive. I know that we all have to make money, otherwise your salary doesn't get paid and my salary doesn't get paid, right? And in day and age where people don't pick up newspapers anymore, you need subscriptions, right? You need clicks on YouTube. I understand that. But, and here's the dangerous part, if we're following the logic of those big social media companies coming out from Silicon Valley, where you know, if it bleeds, it leads, as we used to say, you know, in the sense that the more anger I can produce, the more interaction and engagement I will get on Facebook, on Twitter. Let's make no mistake about it. The engine that fuels these platforms is not your cat photos, right? The engine and the fuel the fuels that those is your post, angry post about the government in Kosovo, right? And which is fine. But if it starts becoming hysteric, and it becomes the only method of discussing, because that's the only method that you will garner attention, okay? Then what happens is, and I come back to Turkey and US, your question, then it becomes polarized. And then you no longer see yourself, look, I'm from Kosovo, you're from Kosovo, we might vote for different parties, but let's have dinner together. Now you've become an enemy, okay, whom I don't even want to share the same border with, right? And there are countries that are loving it. There are leaders who are loving it. It plays into their hands, you know. Let's wake up. Let's not aid them, you know. Let's see the danger writing on the wall, because it's out there. It's no longer a theoretical danger. Even the AfD in Germany, the far-right party, garners 20% of the vote in Eastern German states. And it is in double digits on national elections, right? And God forbid if Macron loses next year, you know, and somebody like Eric Zemmour, who's is an unapologetic racist, you know, comes to power. We have the luxury today, and this is perhaps the final word, we have the luxury today of sitting here today, you know, in Kosovo, having this lovely chat, coming here, you know, showing my German passport, we're having a nice conversation. And so these are things we should not take for granted. You know, democracy, and we in Germany found out this the hard way, can come and go quicker than you think. If you think, you know, we are immune, you are wrong, my friend. You know, in January, the Congress in the United States was stormed, you know, and invaded by people who wanted to overthrow the government. Okay, this is no longer theoretical, and this is why I'm saying I think, you know, we appreciate living in these times, but this isn't for free, my friend. You know, democracy doesn't come for free. Freedom doesn't come for free. You know this very well in this country, okay? You need to fight for it every day. We in Germany need to fight for it. We in Europe need to fight for it every day. Something that I'm afraid some of the new generations who have grown up and born into peace, prosperity, you know, have forgotten, you know. But this is now the 21st century. I think the seas are, you know, are getting rocky, and we better yet get prepared for it.
Mr. Aslan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here today with us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure indeed. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.